First of all, I don't accept that all lives are of equal value. My children's and my grandchildren's life is worth much more than mine because they've got a lot more of it ahead. The whole concept of quality life years ahead is absolutely fundamental if one's going to look at the value of these things.
That's Lord Sumption last week talking about why a lockdown harms everyone whilst isolation of the most vulnerable is a better way. And, if those people die, well, they're of less value than the young. Is he right on that? We keep on hearing from some quarters that lockdowns are a cure worse than the disease itself, in particular in relation to the damage it's doing to the economy. But death is real. The economy is something that mankind has cooked up. So is he right to set one up against the other? And is he right that some lives are worth more than others? I'm Phil Dobbie. We'll look at that today on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. Welcome along. So, Steve, the attitude of some over this whole COVID-19 thing is that we should just shield the old and let everyone else work so that the economy doesn't suffer. And look, if a few old die as a result of that, that's just the price we have to pay because at least it's keeping the economy ticking over. And of course, it is mainly the old who've died from COVID-19. So let's take the position of this group of people who have this view. Let's call them the cold, heartless bastards.
That's a good value-free title. That'll do as a description.
Yeah, well, it is value. I'm not saying they are cold, heartless bastards. I'm just calling them in this situation a group of, let's call them actors that we will define as cold, heartless bastards. They say, we shouldn't isolate because the over 60s are holding back the economy. So have they got a point on that?
I mean, if you wanted to sit down and do a calculation, which first of all, assumption number one, let's assume people over that age, over whatever age we're talking about, are human anymore. That's always an important part of the sort of economic calculus. And then you say, if we don't actually have to spend money on them, we can spend it on, more relevant stuff today, like, fireworks. And it certainly is.
Eat more avocado on toast, for example.
Yeah. It's dehumanizing. And that is probably what I find most repulsive about the whole thing, that these people who are talking about rational calculation are leaving out the essence of humanity itself and being so-called rational, while at the same time, I'd love to do a Venn diagram of those people, a complete one. Here are three circles. Where do you stand? Because they seem to be they seem to be so-called pro-life, so that means they're anti-abortion. They're also pro the death penalty. And here, now they're coming along and saying that we shouldn't worry about old people dying because they're old. The capacity to hold, antagonistic attitude. I'm pro-life. That's why I'm in favor of old people dying of COVID.
But it is a bit bizarre, isn't it? Look, the reason why I thought we should cover this today was because this week Lord Sumption, who is Sumption.
He's sumptuous. Okay.
He leads a sumptuous life, I think, and makes lots of assumptions, maybe, when he's there, because he's been a former Supreme Court judge. He was on a BBC TV show this week. This is a bit of a worry, that this is the sort of people who are making judgment calls. But he was talking about the value of human life. He just said it's a fact that older people are worth less. They have less value because they have less to live. And he was talking about that in relation to lockdowns and the impact on the economy, but also arguing over, who should and who shouldn't get vaccines. And unfortunately, he was getting questioned by a stage 4 cancer patient who asked whether her life was less valuable than someone who was perfectly healthy, to which he didn't give a direct answer, but you could tell the answer, as far as he was concerned, was yes. So, what a shame. If someone over 70 dies or someone with a terminal illness dies before their time, if it means everyone else can go to work, that's going to be good for the economy. I mean, that's the argument, isn't it?
Yeah, well, to me, it's just we're seeing some classic instances of what it means to have a market-oriented way of thinking about humanity. Because this is all dependent upon us being in a capitalist economy where you try to put a monetary price upon virtually everything. If you imagine if we were back in the Kalahari Desert or on in the Rift Valley or that's sort of early Cro-Magnon society. Your elders were the ones who knew everything. And it was a great tragedy when one of the elders went because their knowledge was lost. And that respect for the seniors even if you look at, say, what is more fundamental in human society, is it valuing a group on the basis of their contribution to the economy, or valuing wisdom? And clearly, there's no wisdom in the valuations these people are making. It's also, I mean, there are so many elements to this, because, you better interrupt me, because often I can rave on this one for quite a while.
No, but I like the direction you're going, because even just, the value that we place on older employees is an example of that, isn't it? That, once you're over 40, you're over the hill. Lots of companies would rather hire a 20-something, whereas the over 40s got, or something, the over 50s have got so much more knowledge that they could impart. And okay, there's the assumption that a lot of it is out of date knowledge, but there's a lot of things that just don't go out of date.
Well, look,
and it's wisdom that you mentioned.
That turned up on the financial markets, because by the time we had the 2000 stock market bubble, everybody who experienced the 87 stock market crash wasn't there anymore. Now, if you'd had the wisdom of ages, and people who experienced 1929 and 1966, which is the beginning of breakdowns, 1973 and 1982 and 1987. Those years together. And so here we go again. I've seen this one before. Yeah. I know where this one ends, and you would therefore potentially not have had the bubble in the first place. So this lack of this focus upon youth and the ignorance of wisdom is a major part of why we end up having so many calamities caused by the lack of wisdom.
But Lord Sumption's point was that, this
Lord
idea of
Sumption,
placing his assumption from Lord Sumptuous was that, that the value of human life is a well-known economic calculation, and it's used all the time. It's used in health circles, for example, it's just a fact of life that's the way we deal with the numbers.
Well, the funny thing is, I can criticise that, but at the same time, one important point from David Graeber's work was that when he looked back and tried to see what was actually the basis of the origins of money, it was more people putting value on a human life which had been taken and saying this much money is relevant to compensation for taking that person's life. So in a bizarre sort of way, the beginnings of the monetary economy began with putting a monetary value on life. And in that sense, our Lord Sumptuous is in keeping with the long tradition of reducing humanity to a monetary valuation.
Right. Well, when you were taking someone out, like if you, because
you'd already taken them out. Right. It wasn't exactly a friendly time for humanity in general. But if you see what the Sumerians treated some of their those conquered nations, but the valuation was there. That's how much you've taken. You give us that much back, and that's compensation for having killed so and so.
Right. Okay. So you'd get more for. I'm not implying this at all. This is going down a very dark road. You get more. Yeah. You'd get more for killing Lord Sumption than you would the stage 4 cancer patient.
Now there's a bargain. Maybe we should suggest it to him. I'm sure at a reasonable price, it could be an offer too good to refuse.
Yes, given that we've now placed an economic value on you. Well, there's the thing as well. If you are killing people, do you get less of a prison sentence if you kill someone who's old and therefore was of lesser value to society?
And maybe you get paid after a certain age level. Yeah.
Very dark road.
I wanted to take this back to where we began as humans, and that's why I made the point about the elders, that we used to value the elders. The elders were the ones that had wisdom of and that wisdom was something that's precious to be maintained. But you also had respect for the person, in some ways having survived what it took to stay alive to reach old age. At that time. So there was a sense of respect and cohesion, and we've lost that completely and replaced it by a dollar valuation. And now you get this nonsense of, trying to say that we should not worry about the old dying because, hey, they're old. That was not exactly how our the original humans would have considered the topic. In fact, the person who said that, the young one, would probably be a part of a sumptuous feast right now, but not with his mouth open.
No.
Well, possibly with an apple in it.
Apple in his mouth, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, if you want to hear the full discussion, we get more into the question of actually whether having lots of pensioners might actually be a benefit rather than a cost to society. Then you'll need to subscribe to this podcast to hear it in full. And you can do that by going to debunkingeconomics.com and choosing a subscription option there, or become a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen. We'll be back again with another one next week, looking at the independence of central banks. Is it a thing of the past? Join us for that one with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. See you next week.